All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I've got my friend Bon Halbert with us. Bon, welcome, man. So awesome to have you here.
It's great to have you ask me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad I asked you, Bon. So I know we were talking before we hit the record button here. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to get right to this. And so you and I, gosh, you know what? I know it was a Genius Network meeting where you and I first met.
Mhm.
And I think it was the one with Peter Diamandis was there too, if I remember right. I don't remember, but I know we met at Genius Network years ago.
Yeah, no, I have more of a memory of you than I do him.
You know what? You just made my day, Bond. So what I want to do is I'll start by just letting you share a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you to do what you know. We'll just kind of set some context there and let the listeners know who's Bond Halbert and what are you all about.
Okay. Well, that's also going to tie into a lot of to the main topic that you usually cover on your podcast a little bit, which is, okay, who I am. I'm somebody who, unlike everybody else who has I was sleeping in my car story, I grew up in direct response marketing. And I don't mean that, like I inherited a business from my father or my dad was one of these people. I really was licking stamping, stuffing, sealing envelopes when I was a little kid for test mailings. I did liaison work for my father and his clients. My dad was training me to think like a direct response marketer and a copywriter from a very early age. In fact, a lot of people wouldn't believe that if it wasn't for the book, The Boron Letters, where he's there. Actually, it's a series of letters where he's teaching me about life and business and things like that. So most people I don't have the same background as everybody else. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I do think there's a huge advantage in it because when you start learning direct response marketing at like 11 or 12, you get the basics in such a core kind of cellular way that it's kind of like, when Neo finally sees the Matrix for what it is. It's like you see all these angles and opportunities and ways to do stuff. Now, famously, my father's probably known as one of the best copywriters who ever lived. But from what I learned from him was techniques dealing with persuasion. I learned the direct response marketing business. And my father, unlike a lot of other marketers, was marketing all the time. And I mean, if he was awake, he was marketing. He was persuading somebody to do something. He was toying with somebody to see if he could get them outraged. He was, he was testing. He was constantly testing verbally with people and things like that. And he thought in headline form, and he would say things in headline form, and he'd try and, strike reactions in me or my brother, or, so it wasn't like the copywriters of today where they like, okay, let me sit down and look at my swipe file, which is a term my dad actually coined. I looked for finding somebody who coined it before him, but they would, so those are the people who say, I'm going to work on my business today on Monday or whatever. My dad didn't do hardly anything in his mind that wasn't marketing related. In fact, my mother would call him like, one of those like idiot savants where it's like he couldn't, he would blow up his car by not putting oil in it because he couldn't take care of basic mundane things. But he spent all of his time thinking about sales and persuasion and making money and direct response marketing. And it was mail order, it was space advertising, and then it got into the internet. And of course, when you have the basics, and this is a very key important part that I want to really emphasize, when you have the basics down, because a lot of people don't go back to the original source of things. When you have the basics down, the changing and the adapting becomes a lot easier. So when my dad finally accepted my brother and I's argument that the internet was going to change the world, he took it by storm. He put up a website and it became the Gary Halbert letter became the online mecca for copywriting, and it's because if you understand the basics of everything, you never fear change. And the one thing that and what I do, just real quickly, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about myself, I teach direct response marketers, and I found myself teaching new tactics and tricks and things that I developed to top marketers that were just my friends. And then eventually I started getting into teaching people to learn copywriting and direct response marketing. Now, the reason I say "and" is because a copywriter is so much more valuable if they are a direct response marketing expert. I would rather have a copywriter who knows to put a feature and a benefit into a headline. Why won't this stop? Oh, got to hit the stop button. I'd rather have a copywriter that knows that, you're going to put a feature and a benefit and make a headline newsy, but also knows that if you remail the unopens to your list with a new subject line, just remail the same email with a different subject line, you're going to make more money than having somebody who, wow, they were really clever with their words and it was really creative and stuff like that. You're infinitely more valuable as a copywriter.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I started a group where I teach people direct response marketing and copywriting. But I mean, all the basics of copywriting, but I also give them systems that are based on the basic knowledge that I learned, so that we do offer templates. We have templates in there. But what we do is, when you go through the research that I show you how to do, when you go through the headline systems that I show you, you're not pumping out something that looks just like somebody else who popped open a swipe file.
Yeah.
Because that works for certain levels of clients. But when you get to the higher end of the marketing world, all great marketing campaigns have two things in common. One, they don't sound like anything anybody's ever heard before. And you can't do that by, going with a test. The other thing is, or without testing something new. The other thing that they have in common is they're a surprise to the people who wrote them. I'll ask you, I've never heard that the answer has never changed. Your biggest marketing win is success in your business. It was kind of shocking how big it was to you. It wasn't something, that's just the way everybody, and that's what I saw growing up. And because I saw so many people growing up, and I never had that like, oh, this person's so-and-so. My dad was only ever like, oh, do you know who that is, one time? And I think it was Eugene Schwartz. Okay. He was with my brother when he saw him. But, when I was growing up, people like Dan Kennedy were learning the business, and it was not so I was never starstruck. I took everybody for their talents and for the good. I judged ideas based on the ideas. And my father also taught me to, judge an idea based on the merits of the idea, not judging by who it comes from. So it wasn't like I wouldn't listen to you if you were a nobody. And it wasn't like I followed your advice implicitly because you were a somebody. I would break down like, okay, is that logical or not? So anyway, that's my background, and that's what I do.
That's pretty impressive. And you're right. Growing up, in that environment, in that direct response marketing environment, I didn't discover direct response marketing until way later than you, and when I did discover it, it was like, wow, how awesome is this, And so, yeah, that's cool.
My dad took me to marketing meetings like other people would take their kids to baseball games. That's that's the level of interest he had in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I met your dad on one occasion at an event that Joe Polish hosted years ago. And of course, Joe has all kinds of stories about your dad too and stuff, and so
everybody who's met my dad has a story about my dad.
There's so many stories, man. There's so many stories. Okay, so now that we've kind of set a little bit of context here, I wanna, we're gonna pivot and I'll reiterate the question for the benefit of all the listeners. Have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person? And Bon, I'm looking forward to hearing your story, your experience around this, because I know it's gonna be good. I know that. So.
Okay. Well, my obvious answer, which I'm not going to go into at all, is obviously my father, right? Okay. Nobody had a greater effect on me than him.
Sure.
But he introduced me as a kid to Jay Abraham.
Okay.
He actually, one time I was getting ready for school, and he said, "No, you're not going to school today." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, whatever they're going to teach you in math or English or history, you can learn tomorrow." says, but today I'm going to take you to show you where the magic in business happens. And he took me to, it was at I think it was a Marriott in Santa Monica. And we went to a lunch meeting with Jay Abraham and a top list broker.
Okay.
That was Eric Weinstein. And so what they would do is they had back then what they called data cards. And the data card was the list of how big the list was, what the hot, how many new names a month that they would get, what the average amount of money they spent on whatever it is they were, how much it was to rent the list, all the details like that, where the list was generated from. And they would go through it, and Jay would talk about what kind of offers you could make to that list. And then my dad would talk about, okay, if that's the offer you want to make to the list, this is the headline and the angle and the copy, right? So it was like the trifecta. So, when you hear about marketing, you'll hear this all the time, that and it's absolutely true, the most important thing is the market, the offer, and the message match, right? And you want the market and the offer to match more. That your message can actually be pretty lamely written, as long as the market is as long as you're hitting the market with the exact perfect offer, right? Then you can just basically describe the offer. You don't have to be creative, you don't have to be clever, you don't have to write like Hemingway or Hunter S. Thompson or anything. Anyway, so that's what was going on at that table. That was, Eric was identifying the market, right? Jay was talking about the offer. My dad was the one crafting the message. Okay. So, and they were the best in the entire world at all three of these things.
Wow.
Okay. So but the way that ended up changing my life is in a different way. Now I'm not, real close with Jay. He's not gonna, I mean, we see each other, we know who each other are and stuff like that. But I don't want to make it sound like, he's in my business or I'm in his business or anything like that. But what he taught me that was different from what my dad taught me, because my dad taught me everything about the direct response business, is he taught me how to spot opportunities that nobody else was spotting. And it would be clever things like this. So for example, let's suppose that you're a copywriter and you find somebody and they've got a business, but you're talking to them and they're like, I don't, my business is kind of going downturn because we're in a recession. I was selling business coaching and this and that. And you say, hey, I got an offer that I think here's something that you should offer to do it. So I learned, you guys should look this up. Don't I'm not going to waste the limited time we have here, but I learned about lifetime value of clients, average order values, upsells, all these things, I was a teenager. But so what he would do is he would say, okay, listen, you can't afford to hire me as a copywriter right now. I'll tell you what, you have this product and you have this offer. Let me write the email to your list. And if I write the email to your list, you just give me 30% of the sales up to, let's say, $10,000. So then I get my $3,000 fee. If I get paid $3,000, you've gotten paid a lot more money than that. So you have nothing to lose, and it creates a win-win-win situation. Or, I'll tell you what, I'll write this offer for you. But what you allow me to do is you allow me to mail your list. Okay. So I'm going to mail them my offer. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. That you don't like that one. I'll tell you what, here's another person I know. Look, you have a campaign that was working a few months ago, but the recession has hit hard. And now it's like, barely breaking even, or it's losing money. I'll tell you what we do. I've got this other person who's got an offer. You've already paid for the names and you've already got this list. Let's mail your list this JV offer. I get 10% because I'm putting together the deal. So he was opening my eyes to things that were beyond the, hey, pay me $15,000 and I'll, and this was back in the 80s, but pay me $15,000 and I'll write the copy for you. That was my, that was my dad's deal. He was the first one to really get a percentage. There was a guy before him who got like a nickel, a letter that was mailed, but nobody got percentages before because my dad was so busy and, had so many people wanting to hire him. He started doing that. The other thing he did was when he raised his rates, he was the first one to get asked for and get $15,000 for an ad campaign. And this was back, when you could buy a house in LA for like $60,000. So that means that,
Wow.
that means that in today's market, that would be like, getting paid $150,000 for an ad. And he goes, Bon, you know why I'm the first one to get $15,000 an ad? And I go, no. He goes, because I'm the first one to ask for it, without blinking. So, but anyway, my dad, showed me this whole one side of the world, but Jay opened up my mind to two different things that are extremely important in direct response advertising and marketing: creating win-win-win situations. Two people can't get it together. One doesn't have the money to hire you, right? Or they're missing an element. Bringing in a third person and creating a situation where everybody wins. Okay. And then everybody gets something out of it that's a benefit, including the customers and stuff. That kind of like creative deal making and thinking was something that I learned from Jay. And it has served me extremely well ever since then, because, I can turn around and say, well, because it also taught me the second part, which was problem solving. So here's the thing: when you are going through your research and you're going to do something, you're going to make an irresistible offer. So based on what my dad taught me, I would go through and so this is like a combination of thinking like Gary and Jay. Okay. So what would happen was my dad would teach me to walk in the shoes of your prospects. Okay. And Jay would talk about seeing opportunities and then kind of reconfigure and how to do something. So I'm going to give you an example that I did, an example that everybody else can do. Okay. So Jay now spends a lot, or he did for a little while, talks a lot about preeminence in your market, becoming preeminent, which means, becoming such a recognized authority that people just want to work with you before you've even pitched them. Right. And there's a lot, but the one thing that's missing when he talks about preeminence is because he talks about, serving your market well, being so good at your market that, people want creating an offer that's better than everybody else's, having the best intentions for your clients and helping them to the point where, you're almost completely selfless and stuff like that. But the part that's sort of missing was how to convey that. Okay. And the way that I say you convey it is with what I call the Google sniff test. Okay. If you sell somebody something for over $1,000 in services, one of the most natural things they're going to do is Google who you are. Right. And so now everybody thinks, okay, my name's Kevin Thompson. So it's an average, it's a normal name. There's probably a bunch of people with that name. Right. For me, I'm lucky. There's not a lot of Bond Halberts out there. But what's going to happen is they're going to Google the very next logical word. So let's suppose that you're selling consulting. They're going to do Kevin Thompson Consulting, right? Or Kevin Thompson Direct Response, whatever is natural. And then they're going to look at those results. And are those results going to show just a LinkedIn profile and maybe that you're on Facebook, and then the rest of it is like, Spokio and other Kevin Thompsons? Or are they going to hit that and they're going to see that you're on 15 or 20 different interviews on 20 different podcasts, and that you've got 3 books that you've sold, and that, you have your own website and there's advertising on your name? There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that first impression. And that's how you sell yourself as preeminent, right? Because now you're just like, I literally have been able to tell people. Somebody once said, if you had to sell your services and you had to do it with 3 words, what would you do it? And my answer was Google my name. Okay. There you go. That's because if you Google my name, you see that I really do know what I'm talking about. And you can go in and you can find out and go, oh yeah. And then you'll start going to different podcasts, and if they're smart like you are, they'll ask me different questions, and they'll, so instead of everybody getting it, they'll get different answers and they'll get actionable advice, which is what I'm going to give you right now, which is an example of this kind of thinking. Okay. I was going to put out my dad's book, The Boron Letters, on Amazon. And as I was doing that, I was like, okay, the first thing I got to do, going back to the basics, is buy a book on Amazon. Okay. So I go to Amazon to buy a book, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy scientific advertising or something. And I look and I'm about to buy it. And as I'm scrolling down, it says, well, if I buy $25 worth of books, I get free shipping. But it says people who bought this also bought this book. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, you know what? I would like to have my book down there in that spot. Okay. So how do I do this? And this is where my dad and Jay's thinking come into play. Most marketers are only marketing to their customers. I'm thinking, okay, like my dad would teach me to think, and like Jay, what is it Amazon is probably programming or caring about that would make them want to connect my book to the other book? So they want to see people still buying the same, to people buying one book, buying another. That's obvious. There's a connection there. They probably don't want to connect one book with a book that's $0, right? There's no profit in that for them. So they probably want a certain amount. At that time, I had learned that they will punish you if you try and sell a Kindle book for more than $10, right? So I'm figuring all these things out about what would Amazon want to put me there. So I go through the normal stages of launching the book. And I told everybody, I said, hey, if you've got an old school version of the Born Letters, you buy my book off of Amazon, you get an e-Kindle book or anything, do me a favor, go into Facebook, show it up on your phone. And then when you do that and tag, hashtag the Boron Letters, right? And then I will look at the hashtag and you will all be invited into a webinar. Okay. So now I'm collecting the names and contact info of everybody who's in there, right? But more importantly, I'm getting that advertising for free because if you're going to go onto Facebook and you're going to see 3 or 4 of your friends with a big smile showing this book, and you're going to say, hey, why are you doing that? I'm seeing that all over. What's that about? Oh, Bond's giving this free webinar to people who are just showing copies of the Born Letters that they have. Yep. So here's the new twist. I go in there, and the first thing I do is I tell everybody, I said, okay, listen, one of these other books that just came out was John Carlton's Entrepreneur's Guide to Getting Your Shit Together. I think you guys should go buy that book, right? So they go buy that book. Now I'm connected, right? So what's happening is Amazon is saying people bought this also like John's book.
Oh, like John's, yeah.
So what's happening now is whenever John goes out, and now everybody else, nobody in the world is giving anybody free publicity, right? And Jay, usually, if you're in Jay's presence, it's because he's doing something really magnanimous and for a lot of people, and he's not charging hardly anything, or you're paid a lot of money for a private consultation. There's very little middle ground. But so very few people will turn around and say, hey, go buy this guy's book. It's great. And I'm not, they didn't, without being asked. John never asked me to do that. So he calls me like a week later. He goes, hey, man, how did you get Amazon to send emails to the people who buy my book pitching your book? And I go, I didn't even know they did that. Right. So this was another principle I had learned growing up. If you can do something once and it's a surprise and works, try and repeat it. If you can repeat it 3 times, you have a business. So the second time I did this, I wrote an email to my dad's list. And I said, this is the holy trinity of copywriting books. And then it was the Born Letters, the Robert Collier letter book, and scientific advertising. I am now tying my book to the 2 top selling books that, that are out there on Amazon, right? So Amazon, all of a sudden, and now there's other things that I found out go to it, like Amazon will help promote it if you get a certain number of reviews and blah, 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 blah. So, but what's happening is now Amazon has connected these up. So for the third attempt, and this was my own personal book that I wrote the whole thing. And it was the first book on editing sales copy ever written. So far, I think it's the only one. What I did was I told everybody, if you buy the book and you show me a receipt that you bought it, I will send you a checklist of my editing checklist that's printed on a notepad for free. And on the notepad, those notepads you get that are like shopping lists that a realtor will drop off at your door. Okay, so I called up one of them. I said, how much will this be can you just print anything on there? They said, sure. So at the top's got a picture of the book, and then the checklist is printed on every single page. So you can just, do the check it off, rip it off every time you're doing it. Okay. And it reminds you of all the things I taught in the book. Well, so this gets me the name and the snail mail address of everybody who is buying my book. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, so then I said, to get that book, you have to go through and, join my list and, sign up and you'll get instructions. And the very first email that I send them is a list of other great copywriting books. Okay. So now everybody's putting out their list, and these are the 10 best copywriting books of all time, because that's one of the top 10 books of any subject. I don't care what it is. What's the 10 top? What do you think are the 10 top must-haves for survival as a prepper? What are the, there's always the top 10 gear list. There's a top 10 everything, right? There's 10 essentials for survival. Anyway, so now, even if I'm not on your list of your top 10, when people go to buy your top 10 list, you're still seeing my book connected to several of these other books, right? And so what I did there was figure out, it was a solution-oriented thing. I was figuring out how to persuade without even talking to Amazon. And listen, I didn't do anything wrong, because what I did was I gave Amazon what they want. I gave them more book sales, right? It was a win-win-win for everybody. I'm not recommending any books that I actually don't recommend. So the buyers get a good list of good quality books that will teach them with good direct response marketing. I'm getting more sales. I get more, addresses and leads. There's nobody who loses here. But the points that I want to make here is what do I want? How do I get to that without a straight up just run ad, cash checks, process refunds, cash checks. And so the other two things that they both gave me was the ability to teach, because what happened was Jay had to be able to teach you about lifetime value to make you understand that the most valuable thing that you can offer somebody or do for your business is to sell your existing customers something else, right? My dad had to teach people come to him, they say, we want to sell this. And he'd say, no, this is the way that you want to do this. And it was, I knew that I hit really Gary Halbert level thinking, and that I had completely arrived when my brother came up with this offer. And he wanted me, he asked my dad about it, and he asked me about it, but he asked us separately and told us not to talk to each other about it, because he wanted truly independent opinions. And so I told him, my dad usually had about 20 standard answers of like, do a free, offer a free report, do something like this. And I said, you know what? Given all the information you've given to me, I'd give away free samples for free. And then I called my dad one day. I said, what you doing? He says, I'm working on an ad for your brother. And I said, oh, he told you about it. So what was your advice? He goes, I told him to give away samples for free. And I was like, yeah. I was like, that's not one of your standard answers. I'm like, okay, we are thinking, I know how to think like you. But I also learned how to think like Jay as well, which was to figure out problem solving, make solutions, creative deal making is one of the ways that I describe it. And so those meetings early on in my life had a profound effect on my life. Now, if you were to turn around and say, who have you met that you do business with that you have a great profound effect on, there would be like Ben Simkin and Caleb O'Dowd. And, there's plenty of people like that. But I got that basic understanding so flippin' early in my life that it has affected every aspect of my life. And by every, I mean, I'm the guy who can walk into the DMV with like no paperwork and come out with registration, and where most marketers are like, I know how to write a good headline and I can do bullets. And, and they're taught a lot of them are taught the basics, but then they're not even taught very critical little details, like how to create that grease slide. And, with my book on editing, I try to explain, look, everybody's looking for a place to stop reading or paying attention to your marketing and move on without being sure they're not missing something in their life that could be valuable to them. Mm-hmm. So the key to the grease slide is not to give them that opportunity. Yeah. Right. And so that comes in the editing process. The power in your marketing comes from research. Okay. So research is where you learn, if you do the right research, previous buyers tell you exactly what your future buyers need to hear in order to buy. So they give you the powerful information. It's more like having a good ear is better than being, a creative writer. Then the the quickest part is actually, or then you germinating the idea. The quickest part is putting that first draft down on paper. There's the two things I want to see. If I'm up against somebody else who's going to write copy or be in the same business as me, I want to see them do two things. I want them to sit down and start thinking about their business while they're looking at a blank screen on a computer. Instead of walking on the beach and having been thinking about this for a week and talking to customers and looking at reviews and having ideas pop in their head. I want to see them do that. The other thing I want to see them do is ask for a swipe file. And the reason I want to see them do that is because I know they're not writing anything better that's already in that swipe file. And I know almost everything in that swipe file has already played out, because all promotions play out. If they laughed, when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, if that still worked, we'd still be seeing that ad selling piano lessons. Sure. It's not still working. It was a great ad. If this car is so quiet that the loudest thing is the clock in the Rolls Royce ad, if that ad was still working, they'd still be running it. Yes. And so I want to see them ask for a swipe file because I know, and by the way, that leads to another thing. People are looking for genius and stuff like that, and they're looking for hard. And people would come to me and say, you and really your dad, you guys could sell ice to Eskimos. And I'm like, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention, because that's work. We want to sell heaters to Eskimos. We want to make an offer that makes life easier. It's really not about coming up with the only way to possibly word this that gets an extra 2%. It is making that market message, the market and the offer match, so that the message is easy to write. And that's what I would get at those meetings with Eric Weinstein and Jay Abraham and my dad. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Eric Weinstein, I would add him to the list too. He was like an uncle of mine that would teach me all kinds of wise stuff. But what happened was I got my first job working at the list brokerage company that he worked at. So that's my bona fides when, my very first job was working at a list broker company. But when things, and this is the final thing that I'm going to say, the one thing that I really, really, and then I'll let you ask any follow-up questions if we had time. The one thing that you need to understand, and I will suggest this to everybody, is you need to understand that the one constant in the universe is change. It really is the only thing that you can rely on. It's 100%. Now, it may be slow. Your house is going to fall down one day. It may take 100 years. Mm-hmm. It may take 200 years because it was really well built by craftsmen back in 1900. But everything changes there, and the pace at which things are changing is evolving greatly. Now, everybody's seen that meme where it was, we went in 100 years from riding horses to putting a man on the moon. Mm-hmm. Well, even since then, okay, when the analogy I just recently started using is when I was a kid, the very first game console you could hook up to a television was Atari's Pong, right? Yeah. Those people had to have the concept idea, then they had to program it, they had to get circuit boards together, and they had to, get some artists to work on the box. They had to cut deals to get advertising. They had to get this distribution to put it in stores and see if it works. They had to do pilots, focus groups and everything, and it worked. And the people who built that unless they blew the money, set themselves up for life, right? Then what happened? Now you can come out with a game where you get 20 designers together at Blizzard or in Electronic Arts, and they start working on a program in a game. And when they get it going and it's a hit, like Scrim or, back in the day, it was, EverQuest and, World of Warcraft or whatever any of these Call of Duty or whatever, all they had to do was do the programming. It took a lot less time to put together that thing, and everybody involved was now set for life. Yeah. This year, I think it was this year, Wordle went viral. That thing probably took about 2 hours to program and make. And they sell it to the New York Times, and whoever did that is probably set for life. Yeah. Now, so what I'm saying is the one thing that's going to happen constantly is the pace of change is going to be just incredible. Yeah. Now, I'm not a religious person, but what I do, I study what they call secular Buddhism, which is the practices of like, like meditating on a certain thought and things like that. And the one thing they teach is about the impermanence of everything. So I will suggest that you go onto Spotify and you search in there guided meditation on impermanence. And it talks about like, at any given moment, you've got like 1 million cells in your body that are dying and regenerating with other ones, and that everything's changing. The world is constantly in flux and everything. But the truth is, the quicker you adapt to that, because when change happens, people panic, right? And I grew up from my father teaching me HALT, which is don't make any decisions when you're hurt, angry, lonely, or tired. And you are going to eventually, again, be hurt, angry, lonely, or tired. I mean, there's no getting around that, right? But if you stay fit and you try and you come to grips with the world as being an ever-changing thing, and you're more emotionally stable from it, you get through that process quicker. Then you adapt, right? And you learn to adapt and easier, and you do better than everybody else is doing. So we're about to, if we're not already, into a recession, right? And recessions are natural. Been through 3 or 4 of them myself. They're going to come around again. If you're in business, you're going to, you got to know how to adapt to them. Well, for copywriters, the first copywriter panics because they start losing some clients. And then after the panic settles, that's when they finally realize, oh, wait a minute. You know what? There are these security companies, because property crime goes up, and there's all these security-based companies that will do well in a recession, like the people who put bars on the windows and the people who do outdoor lighting and all this. And they'll just like, I'll just use the same techniques I used to score those other clients, and I will switch and go after the clients that are recession-proof, right? But that idea can't come to you while you're panicking.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And you will panic because you're not used to the change. So that's a tip that I will give, that I think everybody will be able to behave, be able to actually, start to get them over through that area where they calm down, and then they see opportunity. Because the Gary Halbert proteges and everybody I know, we don't worry about a new platform coming out. Vine is come and gone. Right now there's Discord, who knows how long that's going to be around. Clubhouse was hot for a moment. It's still around, and I know that dates this and everything, but it's, back in the day, Yahoo was like, who's going to take over Yahoo? And then Google comes along. Takes it over.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't care which one it is. I don't care what happens. I don't care about the changing that's come. Change just equals opportunity. And that's something that I really got a lot of insight into with Jay Abraham, because you would see, okay, and my father, they go hand in hand. These people, this is what they're going through. This is what they were taught. This is what they're struggling with. And this would really help them. If that would really help them, how could I actually provide that? So like with the Domino's Pizza campaign, there was thousands of pizza pie parlors all over the country. And they came in and they did a little research, and everybody was saying, well, we got, an old fashioned recipe. I got my grandmother's award-winning recipe. We got the freshest ingredients. Somebody went and talked to those people and said, you know what? I'm sick and tired of not knowing when that damn pizza's arriving, because it's, I planned for it to be, in 20 minutes. It doesn't. I missed it. I can't eat it on my break till later when it's cold. Oh, wait a minute. So I order it early, and then it comes too soon, and it's cold by the time I get my break. I wish you guys could just get that act together, right? The key was in solving that problem. The key was in saying, okay, that's what they want. How do I deliver that?
Yeah.
And if you can be that kind of creative problem solver, and you can add that to persuasion skills and add that to the understanding of everything in direct response marketing, like it is a numbers business. It is about, money's in the list, all of the other things that you learn. You never worry about things like that ever again, because it's just, all you see is opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'll tell you, Bond, you packed so much in there, and I love the story of because the message to market match, message market media, and And that's really cool. I had not heard the story of your dad and Jay and what I wrote down
Eric.
Eric, yeah. And that they just, like, the three of them just were able to collaborate on that. And I can see, like, man, how powerful is that? And
Yeah. Well, the other thing is what happens is when you understand the basics, you see the value in all of it. So like, when, you go to auto fill out, like, you go to Google and you go how to, right? You see all of these different opportunities to, this is where most people are searching and trying to learn stuff. That's information they want. And a lot of it's information they're willing to buy.
yeah,
My dad would teach people to go to the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list, right? And see things on there that this was information people were willing to buy to learn, right? And pay attention to the how-to titles. Well, what I would do is go look at the nonfiction and the fiction and look and find titles and then merge them together and say, somebody was, if the big interest was in, I don't, just name any two things. If it was like military stories and strategies, and another thing was in business, it's like how to use these military strategies in business, to blow up your business.
Okay.
So I would combine the two, right? Because
Uh-huh.
again, I had the basics, and so it didn't make a difference if I was, getting that, finding that information in that directory on Google, or or if it was in the traditional SRDS book, or stuff like that. So the one thing I really, really want to encourage everybody to do is go back to basics, because if you don't go back to basics, that's, by the way, where you beat the top end competitors in everybody's market. Okay, because what happens is the very top copywriter in finance starts to think they know everything, and they stop calling recent customers. So like if we're going into a recession, or we're going to hard economic times, you start paying attention to the reviews that are the most recent, because people have changed their reasoning of why they spent this money. And then you take that information and that messaging and you put it in your message, right?
Mhm.
Because what's happening is it's not the same as, like, let's say it was insurance. You have an insurance company. Before, the message was, I checked around, these guys offer the best coverage for this rate. The newer message might be, these offer, these are the lowest price for the minimum coverage that I have to have by law. Right? It's changing the message, right? Because the things have changed. And what happens is the old expert is still going off that old information because they got too lazy to go back in and work the customer service line.
Yeah.
They got too lazy to look up the most recent reviews. And when it comes to reviews, that's where you get innovative. Like I had an epiphany this morning. You go to look at the negative reviews and the good reviews, right? So the example I always use is those sticks that people have to flick the tennis ball to make their dogs run.
Okay.
And
Yep.
the good reviews are like, yeah, my doctor, I was feeling so guilty because I was so tired, but my doctor said my dog's not getting enough exercise and would die early and everything like that. But I was coming home tired and didn't have the ability to, but now with a flick of a wrist, I can send that ball flying. And the negative review is, oh man, this thing was cheap plastic. It broke in 20 tries. So then what you do is you go to the engineers and you say, hey, can we do a higher polymer plastic? And they say, sure, it's 25 cents extra. You go, dude, go for it. Pay, let me pay for that. So now you're saying, now you can give, with a flick of a wrist, you can give your exercise and your best buddy all the exercise he needs to live a long, healthy life. And it won't break like those other cheap ones, because we invest more into higher polymer plastic, and you won't lose it because it's painted Dayglow green, orange, because the other people are like leaving it at the park and forgetting it because it's green like the grass.
Yeah.
Well, so there's gold in those reviews, and everybody will tell you, if you start to study copywriting, that the best reviews are the passionate ones, passionately angry or passionately happy,
Yeah.
and the longer reviews. But I will tell you that you will also look at, and yeah, we got to go. But the market level awareness, have people study what those are, the 5 levels, of market levels awareness. And I look at those reviews and I use telltale signs from those reviews to get an idea of who those people are. Like, what's their demographic? You can tell from the names who's male, how many are male or female, and roughly. You can tell from those names, like whether they live in the country or, they're tossing these to parks, in the parks and in cities. you can also tell how much knowledge they had about the market from there, and that from that message. So when you're selling to one market level awareness, and you know what I'm talking about, right? With the goal of your copy and your marketing is always to take them from where they are, make them understand that you know exactly why they're there and have all the same information, and take them to the next level. So if they are problem unaware, you need to explain to them, hey, look, I walking around with heart disease, I had no idea, because the truth is, if you've, over 50 and you've gained 2 waist sizes in the last, in the last year or 2, you probably got a really giant chance of, a 56% chance of having heart disease. And these are all the terrible things that can happen. But once you do have it, there's 3 options of which you can do to take care of this, and then, so you're making them now solution aware, right? And then offering them their solution. Well, look at those reviews and look at the messaging, but try and figure out from the review what market level awareness they were at and where they are at now. And you use that message when you're targeting that market level awareness. It's a much higher level way of trying to think of that. And it doesn't have to be your reviews. They can be the reviews of competitors.
Sure. Wow. Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. This was so much more than an interview around people who have had such a big impact on your life. I mean, Bond, you packed a whole damn seminar in there. So for anybody that's listening, that's going, damn, Kev, that Bond guy is one wicked smart guy, man. How can they find out more about what you're doing, and how can they get more info?
Okay, if you're on Facebook, you can join the Gary Halbert Copy Club.
Okay.
That's one thing. There is in there, I list another group where I give a training like once a year and stuff like that for free. And you can go to my website, bondhalbert.com.
Okay.
As my dad would say, cleverly named.
That's right. That's
bondhalbert.com. And you can learn more from me there.
Perfect. Well, Bond, once again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. Any last words before we call it a wrap?
I want to thank you. To be honest, I think I've ever since the some issues that I've had recently, I haven't done a podcast in a while, and you're kind of getting me back on the horse.
Nice. Yeah, well, I'm glad I can hold that role in your life right now,
Yeah.
Bond. Cool.
No, it's actually helpful for me. It's helpful for me to remind myself of what I do know, and it's like.
Well, you're right. I mean, you are a wealth of insight, perspective, and information for dang sure. So
yeah, I'm a little more than a copywriter's kid.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Bond, thank you so much again. Really appreciate it, man.
Oh, thank you.